Hi guys, welcome back to the second episode dedicated to the analysis of the game Lebensraum, designed by Stephen Newberg and published by Compass Games. Well, at first, I don't know if you remember the first episode, but in the first episode of this short series, I illustrated in general the main mechanics of Lebensraum. I dealt with the deployment of the units. Well, on the contrary, in this second episode, I'm going to illustrate the logistics phase. That is the phase that opens the sequence of a turn. So, if you notice, I'm going to show you the logistic phase. Well, the logistic phase is made up of 6 sub-phases, I'd say, and I'm going to start with the movement points determination segment. What does it mean? Well, actually, Lebensraum is focused heavily and quite obviously on the resources that each army should have to fight. And during the movement points determination segment, the players have to determine the movement points that allow them to move and to use air and ships. So how should we determine the movement points? First of all, you have to count the number of the oil points and the number of the refinery points. What does it mean? On the map, and I have just placed some red crosses, you have the 5 oil points that the Axis player possesses at the beginning of the game. And these oil points, together with the refinery points that at the beginning of the game are 7, and you can see that also by considering the Axis East front player card in the starting economics chart. But if you want to count the refinery points, well, you have to look for the upper part of the counter, in which you find the 2 symbols that represent the refinery points. So, for each oil point and refinery point, the player receives 50 movement points. So by considering that on the map the Axis player has 5 oil points and 7 refining points, well, actually the Axis player could get only 5 oil points, 250 movement points. So actually you have to exclude the refinery points left. Why? Because you have to consider a combination of 1 oil point and 1 refinery points. On the other side, on the Soviet side, well, the player could have 6 oil points and, if I will remember, 8 refinery points, but actually the Soviet player gets during this first turn 300 movement points. So after you have determined the number of your movement points, you have to mark them on the East Front movement point track. Actually, I repeat, the Axis player have, let me see, and the movement points, 250 movement points. On the contrary, the Soviet player has 300 300 movement points. So you can consider over the first part of this logistic phase, that is the movement points determination segment. Let's proceed with the reinforcement and replacement segment. Well, let's proceed with the reinforcement and replacement segment. As regards the replacement segment, the axis replacement are listed on the axis reinforcement and replacement schedule as a number of steps separated into two types. Well, I'm going to show you the player aid. On the contrary, as regards the Soviet player, well, the Soviet replacement are not scheduled. You have to consider the number of population points and the number of production points. As usual, I'm going to show you the marker. Well, at first I'm going to show you the marker on the booklet. Well, if you notice, production. Well, this is the production. I'm going to show you a Soviet counter. If you notice, this is the production, and you have to count the production points together with the population points. The population points are to be found, well, for example, I don't know, well, Kursk, there is one, well, Kursk has a value of 1 population points. So, by considering the number of population point together with the production point, the Soviet player can get replacement points. Actually, 10 population points and 10 production points will give 1 infantry step. On the contrary, 5 population points plus 20 production points will give 1 armor step. So actually, guys, you can realize that this marker with the 3 production points are very important. So if one player is going to lose it, well, obviously the production level is going to decrease. So please remember that it's very important to maintain the production points, obviously together with the population. So each time the Soviet player loses one city, for example Lvov, well, he loses 1 population point. So please remember that the population points are important to get more replacements. Actually, about the reinforcements, the Axis player receives 5 reinforcements throughout the game. On the contrary, the Soviet player, well, I'm going to read the paragraph concerning the Soviet player. Let me see. I don't remember exactly well. You have, as regards the Soviet reinforcement, 6 shock infantry units that are to be placed on a city or... sorry, guys. Well, change my mind. When you have new units coming from the pile of the Soviet infantry armies, you can place them in a control city with a population number of 2. On the contrary, as regards the shock infantry units, you had to place them along the edge of the map, and you can enter them via transport by using, obviously, movement points. So reinforcement and replacement segment is a little different when you are comparing the Axis player and the Soviet players, but actually you have only to count, as regards the Soviet player, the number of the population points that have to be added to the production points. On the contrary, on the side of the Axis player, well, the replacements and the reinforcements are scheduled. And that's all as regards the second, the sub-phase B of the logistics phase. Now let's proceed with the air, naval and partisan segment. Well guys, it's time to deal with the air, naval and partisan segment. During this segment, each player may place his markers for several activities. Now I'm limiting my explanation only to the air markers. Why? Because the partisan at the moment cannot be placed, and the naval marker, I'm not going to use the naval marker. So guys, let's focus our attention on the air marker. Obviously, if you notice, this is the typical Heinkel 111, a famous medium bomber, German medium bomber. On the other side, you have here you can see, well, a PE2, if I will remember. I'm not so good at illustrating the several planes that took part in the conflict. Anyway, Soviet air marker, German air marker. At the beginning of this phase, the German has got 8 air markers, and he can use them to support the combat or to make strategic attacks. Well, I'm using the 8 German air markers to support the combats, and simply the player has to deploy them under each HQ. So, for example, there is no limit, so you can also place 3 planes under, I don't know, under Bach. Please remember that when you want to support a combat, well, the range of the plane corresponds to the command range. In this case, Bach has a 3 range, so this airplane could reach 1, 2, 3 these hex, so is a little far. So it's necessary to move the HQ to have the possibility to use the air marker. Anyway, please remember, you use the air marker by placing them under the HQ, and then when you are supporting a combat, you should use 10 movement points. So you can understand that. Do you want to use planes? Well, obviously, the German player, is wasting oil. Quite logic, quite rational, and this is a very good rule, simple but at the same time realistic rule that represents the expenditure of oil when the player is using the air markers. Well, it's all for this phase, for this sub-phase. Let's proceed with the weather determination segment. The weather, guys. The weather is the fourth sub-phase of the logistics phase. And during the weather determination segment of each turn, the players must simply determine the dominant weather. Please remember that the map is divided into sections. Please note this green dotted line, and you have the northern part of the map and the center. Let me see, yes, north weather sector and center weather sector. So you have to roll the die. Well, I'm not rolling for the southern sector, and I'm going to show you, well, this the weather table. you have simply to roll a die, and in the north we are in summer, you have to roll the die, and from 1 to 5 the weather is clear. On the contrary, if you roll 6, the weather is wet. So the weather obviously is affecting the movement points of the units. In the sector center, summer, we are in summer, we are at the beginning of the invasion, clear for 4 turns, or better, with a result of 1, 2, 3, or 4. On the contrary, if you roll 5 or 6, well, the weather is wet. So guys, very, very simple to understand this weather segment. You have to roll the die, and then you have to use this marker. If you notice, north, I don't know, please note, well, let's suppose that I roll 6, so I'm placing the weather north marker on the wet, and on the contrary, I roll 3, so it's clear. So you are ready to move by considering the conditions of the weather in the northern sector and in the central sector. I repeat, guys, I'm not considering
we have
the
reached the
sector.
subphase E, leader transfer segment. What can we do during this transfer phase? Please remember that it's a little different from the movement segment. During the transfer segment, players may transfer from leaders between active fronts or to and from the general staff. Please remember that, for example, Halder at the moment is a general staff leader, and Bock, on the contrary, is commanding the HQ center. If you want to transfer Bock to the OKH, well, you can simply take it and move him, well, to Ostrava, you know, and what is going to happen to Halder? Well, generally, Halder could be transferred to the HQ center, or if you want to replace Bock with a leader coming from the leaders pool, well, simply you are going to place Bock in the pool, and you are going to draw a new leader. And please remember that you can also terminate the leader, and please remember that this sort of elimination could determine a new level of demoralization. Anyway, the transfer segment is very, very easy, and I repeat, you can transfer not only the front active leaders, but you can also transfer the general staff leader. They can be replaced, they can be transferred but not replaced. So this is the difference between the general staff leader and the active leader, the front leaders. So please remember this difference, and please read carefully the chapter 9.4. The last sub-phase of the logistic phase is the F, HQ creation or dissolution segment. Actually, you can create new HQ. Why should I create a new HQ? Why? Probably because I need to support better my combat units. So, for example, if I want to create the HQ, well, group A, well, should be the right HQ, I think. Well, I'm going to spend 20 movement points, and I can, place this HQ on Warsaw, and obviously I have, or better, I could take a new leader and place the new leader on this
HQ marker. So actually I'm trying to support better the attack strength of my units. Obviously, the Soviet player can do the same. Please remember that the logistics phase, well, is for both players. On the contrary, in the following episode, the third episode that I'm going to shoot next week, well, I'm going to start the Axis player phase, but obviously I'm not playing the entire front. I'm focusing only on this part of the map. Please remember that I have already made the attacks that have to be made during the surprise turn. So guys, that's all. I hope to see you soon in the following episode dedicated to Lebensraum, a game by Stephen Newberg. Bye!